Imagine marching like 800 grueling kilometers through a scorching desert. You finally arrive at the exact finish line you've dreamed of for years, only to freeze in terror and beg to go back to slavery. May your path be guided and your mind be clear today and honestly for the entire week ahead, because the ancient people we are looking at in this deep dive completely lost their way. Welcome, everyone. We are stepping back into Numbers chapter 14.
It is fantastic to be here with you. And, you really hit the nail on the head with that opening image. We're using the historical and cultural lenses provided by the Holman and the NAA Portuguese study Bibles today, not just to recount a famous story, but to perform a psychological autopsy on a total societal collapse.
Exactly. Our mission today isn't to give you like a basic Sunday school recap. We are looking at this narrative as a masterclass in the psychology of fear, the brutal realities of leadership during a crisis, and, well, the profound difference between being forgiven and actually escaping the consequences of your actions.
Right. You really have to place yourself in their sandals to grasp the gravity of this moment.
To do that, we have to look at the geographical reality they were facing, right?
Yeah, exactly. They are camped at an oasis called Kadesh Barnea. This is the staging ground. The 12 spies they sent out to reconnoiter the Promised Land have just returned. And when you look at the mapping and logistical data we have for this era, you realize this wasn't just a quick weekend scouting trip over the next hill.
Oh, not even close. We are talking about a journey from Kadesh Barnea in the south, all the way up through the Negev, into the hill country, as far north as Rehob, and then all the way back.
Right.
That is roughly an 800-kilometer round trip on foot. It took them 40 days.
Just think about the physical and mental toll of that. Spending over a month deep behind enemy lines, constantly on edge, assessing heavily fortified cities.
And the sheer size of the local populations. They are pushed to their absolute psychological breaking point.
Exactly. And when you push people to that extreme limit, you strip away all their ideological conditioning and you just see their baseline human nature.
Which is panic.
Total panic. When these spies return, 10 of the 12 bring back a report that essentially acts as a contagion. They describe giant inhabitants and impenetrable cities.
So the result isn't just concern. It is an instantaneous, nationwide psychological break.
Yeah, the text describes an entire population weeping through the night. But the fascinating mechanism here is how fear operates on the human mind. The cultural and textual analysis shows that fear creates a sort of tunnel vision.
Right.
It forces these people to focus so exclusively on the immediate threat, the giants, that it completely blinds them to the historical reality of the miracles they literally just experienced months prior.
And that tunnel vision is what triggers this massive regression. Because it doesn't just stop at despair. People actually hold a vote to draft a new organizational chart.
It's wild.
It is. They decide right then and there to elect a new leader. And what is the mandate for this new administration? March them all the way back to Egypt.
Back to slavery.
Yes. To go back to slavery, we really need to unpack the psychology of that, because on paper, it sounds completely irrational. Why would anyone want to return to a life of making bricks in the mud under the whip?
Well, it's a textbook example of trauma bonding and the human preference for familiar pain over unknown difficulty.
Right.
A known misery suddenly seems vastly superior to an uncertain future, even if that future carries a divine guarantee of prosperity. They're looking at the required courage of freedom and deciding that the predictable trauma of slavery is simply easier to manage.
It's the ultimate human tragic flaw, preferring the comfort of our chains over the responsibility of our freedom.
Yeah.
And you see that play out in how the leadership responds.
Yeah.
We have a massive mob, hysterical, ready to abandon the entire generational project. So what do Moses and Aaron do? They don't call in the military. They don't shout down the mob.
No, they drop face first into the dirt.
Which is just a crazy visual.
It really is, but it's a profound crisis management tactic. By falling on their faces at the entrance of the tabernacle, they are entirely removing themselves from the power struggle.
Right, they aren't fighting back.
Exactly. They aren't submitting to the crowd. They are taking a posture of absolute submission to God. It's a visible demonstration that says, we cannot control you, and we will not fight you. We leave this to a higher authority.
But then you have Joshua and Caleb, the two spies who actually kept their nerve.
Yeah.
And their response is entirely different. They physically tear their clothes.
Yeah.
Now, for the modern listener, that might just seem like a dramatic display of anger or frustration, like, flipping a table.
Right, throwing a tantrum. But that misses the point entirely. When you dig into the cultural context of the ancient Near East, tearing your garments was a very specific, formalized gesture of mourning.
Okay.
It was something you did when a close relative died, or when a devastating plague struck a community.
So they are standing in front of a living, breathing crowd, and they are mourning them as if they are already corpses.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. Joshua and Caleb are looking at their own friends and family, and they are grieving a spiritually dead nation.
Wow.
They understand the mechanics of the covenant they are under. This level of defiant apostasy, actively organizing to return to Egypt, isn't just a bad mood. It is a fundamental breach of contract that is going to bring devastating, fatal judgment.
So they are mourning the death of Israel before the sentence is even handed down.
Precisely.
But even in that grief, they try to perform one last psychological intervention. They stand up to this terrified mob and try to shatter that tunnel vision you mentioned earlier.
They do.
They insist that the land they just walked for 800 kilometers is exceptionally good. It's flowing with milk and honey. And I absolutely love the rhetorical strategy they use here.
It's so clever.
Yeah. The 10 fearful spies had convinced the people that they were like grasshoppers compared to the giants. Joshua and Caleb flip that entire metaphor on its head. They don't say, we are bigger than we look. They say of the inhabitants, they are our bread.
It's a brilliant reframing. They take the object of the crowd's ultimate terror and reduce it to sustenance. They're essentially telling the listener, when you face a massive obstacle, you can either view it as the thing that will crush you or the thing that will nourish you and build your strength.
Right.
They assure the crowd that the Canaanites' protection has been removed.
And how does the crowd respond to this incredibly brave display of faith and reframing? They decide to stone them to death.
Yeah, the mob turns violent.
The congregation literally moves to execute the only two men telling them the truth.
Yeah.
It is mob mentality stripped of all reason. But just as the rocks are about to fly, the ultimate authority steps into the fray. The glory of the Lord appears at the tent of meeting.
And the intervention is immediate. It initiates a terrifying ultimatum. We see a very intense divine reaction here.
God is furious.
Profoundly provoked. He asks Moses how much longer this nation will despise the very authority that liberated them. And then Grime offers Moses what we might call a clean slate protocol. He proposes wiping out the entire rebellious population with a plague and building a brand new greater nation, starting solely with Moses.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about that offer, because this is where the narrative shifts from a mob crisis into a high-stakes cosmic negotiation.
Absolutely.
Moses is essentially being offered the ultimate corporate promotion. God is saying, look, let's scrap this failed startup. We'll liquidate the assets. You get to be the founding father of a whole new project, entirely free from these complaining, toxic coworkers.
Right. All Moses has to do is literally nothing. Just step aside, let justice take its natural course, and accept the promotion of a lifetime.
It's the ultimate test of leadership. Will he sacrifice his people for his own historical elevation?
But he rejects it. He steps right into the breach to negotiate. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what is so striking about his intercession is its sheer pragmatism. He doesn't try to argue that the Israelites are innocent.
No, he can't defend their behavior. They are undeniably guilty.
Right. So instead, Moses completely pivots the argument. He appeals to God's geopolitical reputation. According to the notes, you have to understand the ancient Near Eastern world. Gods were viewed as territorial patron deities.
So if a nation won a war, it meant their god was stronger than the loser's god.
Exactly. And Moses leverages this international political dynamic perfectly. He says to God, the Egyptians and the Canaanites are watching. If you wipe out your own people in the desert, the international community isn't going to assume you're just. They are going to say you simply weren't strong enough to bring them into the land, so you had to slaughter them in the wilderness.
That is such a bold argument. He binds the survival of this completely ungrateful mob directly to the global perception of God's power.
He really does. And then he takes it a step further by appealing to character. He quotes God's own resume back to him. He reminds God of the exact words previously used to describe the divine nature, that he is slow to anger, rich in steadfast love, and forgiving.
But he also acknowledges the other half of that resume, because God's character description also explicitly states that he does not leave the guilty unpunished.
Right, there is a demand for justice.
So we have this incredible tension between the necessity for divine mercy to preserve the covenant and the absolute requirement of justice to address the rebellion. Which brings us to the verdict. So What does this all mean for the people?
Well, it's a complex resolution. Moses secures the pardon, meaning the nation won't be instantly annihilated, but the consequences are severe. This is perhaps the most sobering takeaway. Pardon does not equal immunity from consequences.
Yeah.
The Holman study notes point out a profound use of eye for an eye justice applied here. Because the spies scouted the land for 40 days, God decrees that the Israelites will wander the desert for 40 years, 1 year for every single day of their failure.
And we really need to understand the function of that 40-year sentence. It wasn't just an arbitrary round number. 40 years is the exact biological time frame required for an entire adult generation to die off naturally.
Right. It's a generational reset.
Exactly. The slave mindset, that trauma-bonded psychology that kept making them want to run back to Egypt, was so deeply infected that it couldn't be trained out of them. It had to literally die out.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The desert becomes a quarantine zone for an ideological contagion, and the dark irony of how the sentence is delivered is staggering.
Getting exactly what you asked for.
Literally. The NWA notes highlight this. God uses the very words they shouted in their hysterical panic as the blueprint for their judgment.
This is the part that always gives me chills. During their riot, the people cried out, "We wish we had died in this desert." And God essentially replies, "Granted, everyone 20 and older will die in this desert."
Yeah. And it goes further. They also cried out, "Our children will become prey." And God flips that completely. He says, actually, the children you said would be prey are the exact ones who will inherit the land.
Wow. And what about the spies who started it?
Immediate consequences. The 10 unfaithful spies who incited the panic are struck down by a plague immediately. It is a swift, fitting end, as the notes point out, for those who incited an apostasy of death. Only Joshua and Caleb survive because Caleb had a, quote, different spirit.
So the sentence is handed down. The verdict is final. You would think that people would sit in the dust and accept their fate. But human nature doesn't just quietly accept defeat. The morning after, we get this tragic, almost comical psychological whiplash.
It is a remarkable display of cognitive dissonance. Upon hearing their sentence, they mourn bitterly, but then they suddenly decide, wait, we changed our minds, we've sinned, but we'll go up and conquer the land now.
Why is doing the right thing suddenly the wrong thing here?
Because they still fundamentally misunderstand their relationship with the divine. Moses explicitly warns them not to go. He lays out the anatomy of a doomed mission. He says, God is no longer with you. But they go up presumptuously. The Hebrew word implies acting stubbornly.
And the most critical piece of intelligence Moses gives them is that the Ark of the Covenant is staying in the camp.
Exactly. The physical symbol of God's presence and backing is not going with them, but they march up anyway, attempting to assault fortified Canaanite and Amalekite positions in the hill country.
Completely stripped of their divine cover.
Right. It's tactical suicide. You cannot force a blessing that you have already forfeited.
And the defeat is disastrous. The Amalekites and Canaanites easily sweep down and crush them. They shatter their lines and chase them all the way back.
To a place called Hormah, which serves as the perfect punctuation mark to this entire sequence. As the NWA notes reveal, the name Hormah literally translates to destruction. They tried to force God's blessing without God's presence, resulting in total ruin.
It is an incredible, devastating arc. We start at the edge of the Promised Land, move through a night of trauma-induced rebellion, witness a cosmic negotiation, and end with a desperate defeat at Hormah.
And when we synthesize all these sources, what this text perfectly illustrates is the delicate balance between divine mercy, the nation survives, and absolute justice. The rebels face the full consequences of their lack of faith. Forgiveness doesn't erase consequence.
It is a profound reality check. It makes you wonder, in our own lives, how often do we miss out on exactly what we've been promised, simply because we let the fear of the obstacles shout louder than the memory of what we've already overcome?
That is a deeply relevant question to leave with.
It certainly gives us all something to ponder this week. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. We officially say goodbye for now. As you step back into your own life and face whatever obstacles are in front of you, we declare that God blesses all of you listening today. Take care, stay curious, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.